I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're uncovering the profound leadership insights of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Joining me today is one of my favorite guests. His name is Emilio Iodice, and he's written a powerful new book. It's called Lessons from History, The Leadership Challenge of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Why It Matters Today. It delves deep into Dr. King's unparalleled leadership qualities and their impact on the civil rights movement. This compelling analysis provides timeless lessons for today's rapidly changing social landscape. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Emilio, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Logan, thank you for the invitation. Thank you.
My pleasure. I was reviewing some facts about Dr. Martin Luther King today, and probably one of the most stunning among them is the fact that he was just 39 years old when he died. He had accomplished so much. And as you point out, had kind of written a guide to leadership through example. Why do you think he was able to achieve so much at such a young age?
I believe it was commitment. He said that he didn't want a life filled with glory or riches. He wanted a meaningful and committed life, a life committed to a cause, and to leave something behind in terms of a legacy dealing with human rights. And he felt that age wasn't the issue. In his last speech, he said, yes, I would like to live a long time. Longevity would be wonderful. But it's not so much how long you live, but how you live during that short period of time. And he concentrated everything on his goals, his objectives, and to leave behind a legacy that we can still talk about today, 56 years after his death.
Yeah. And it's amazing how he was popular across the board in the United States. Obviously, there are some extremes that didn't like him. But, you know, I had an Irish mother who was born in 1919 who was crazy about Martin Luther King. And if you're appealing to her, that means you're appealing to a lot of people, because obviously he connected with African Americans in our country, but he also connected with white Americans. And that was so important, that cohesiveness, don't you think?
Absolutely. He harked back to our basic principles as Americans, those rights that were in the Declaration of Independence, the rights that were in the Constitution. And he had a strategy, he had a vision. And when he confronted those people in the South that were vigorously against him, that hated him, he harnessed that hate and he used it to propel his movement. So you can imagine someone like Bull Connor, who with his police, billy clubs, dogs, hoses, they attacked his people, and he knew that they were going to be attacked, they were going to be injured, they were going to be put in jail. But the magic of television, the ability to communicate around the world instantly, propelled his movement and reached into the room of your mother.
Yeah,
She
exactly.
saw that on television. That's how she got to know Dr. King and his message. And that was his point. He wanted to make sure that he could get his message to everyone, because he felt the suffering wasn't only for Black Americans, that it was for so many other people, and that the message of nonviolence, of moral certitude, of fighting injustice was something that so many different people all over the globe could associate with, and especially in different parts of the United States.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. What distinguishes a great leader is the ability to communicate great ideas. The I Have a Dream speech is universal to this day in appeal. And if you look at FDR, if you look at JFK, if you look at RFK and MLK, what they had in common is they could connect with an audience. In your book, you write about the leadership challenge of Dr. Martin Luther King. What was that challenge?
The challenge was to turn over the status quo, to fight the status quo. Segregation in the South was something that was there for ever since the Civil War. And as Blacks moved to the North, there was a new form of segregation developing. So he had to fight a status quo that was social, political, moral, but it was in various parts of the United States. The South was his foundation. It was his stage, but he was also talking to what was going on elsewhere. So his leadership challenge was to bring together coalitions of people. If you see in his marches, you'll see Walter Reuther of the AFL-CIO. You'll see white and Black politicians. You'll see members of all types of organizations that were fighting for human rights at that time. And we're talking about the 1950s. So he was able to go across the board, unify these coalitions, and that was an enormous challenge. He had to convince these people everywhere that their problems, their great visions were part of his vision. So they were sharing the same goals, the same objectives.
Building strong coalitions is great when you're trying to make change, no doubt. But how do you get those coalitions together? Was he a very shrewd negotiator? Was he extremely persuasive rather? Was he a velvet hammer who was very smooth on the outside, but hard as nails on the inside and got things done? Tell us a little bit about that side of how he made deals happen like that.
I think, first of all, it was his honesty and integrity that was obvious. Martin Luther King was really a great Christian. He would consider himself a Judeo-Christian, but he was truly a great person in terms of honesty, integrity, and ethics. So those people that he dealt with at other levels, they knew that they were dealing with, first of all, an honest person, a person that had values, and that was extremely important. Secondly, he could communicate at all levels. He was a marvelous pastor and a marvelous preacher, but he could communicate with workers at all levels. And then he could sit in the office of President Kennedy and LBJ and get his points across. And he can convince anyone of what he was doing was right. It had moral integrity, and that it was difficult to deny that moral integrity. And it was difficult to deny the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and what America was all about. So he brought people in based on moral suasion. I would call it moral suasion, and convinced them that it was the right thing to do to join him. It was the absolute right thing to do.
Agreed. He left behind huge shoes to be filled. I don't think they've been filled ever since with a civil rights leader. I can't think of another civil rights leader that bridged the gap, that brought people together, that worked the way he worked with, like you said, many, many disparate groups who came together. So there's been a void since he left this planet, don't you think?
This is true because we haven't had leaders like him that have exhibited two basic qualities that he had. One was courage. He was beaten up many times. He was put in jail. His house was bombed so many times. So he had this enormous courage, and he knew that his life would be short, that he would give this up, the most precious thing a person has, for this cause. So he had that, but he had emotional intelligence. This emotional intelligence, in the case of Dr. King, gave him the fortitude to face up to anybody and anything. He wanted to be a good example, and he was. He was a wonderful example. But we haven't been able to find anyone with that same kind of DNA, the same combination of things
Yeah.
that would, again, bring us together to resolve the social problems that we have today. We have a scarcity of the right kind of leadership, unfortunately.
Absolutely. I agree. The subtitle of your book is Why It Matters Today. If you look at 2024 and the state of the dream, which is often talked about, have we come to a colorblind society? I think the answer is clearly no. We've made some progress. We've had a Black president of the United States. We have a female Black vice president of the United States now. But I think even the fact that we have to point out race is not part of that colorblind society. Why does it matter today? And how can his leadership qualities be enacted today?
It's really an issue of what he would often say was, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Just a couple of days ago, I read in the New York Times about this 17-year-old African-American girl who just received her PhD. So imagine what is ahead for her, and how many millions of Black people, people of all races and colors, are out there that, because they don't get a good education, because they live in ignorance, they suffer from so many different issues, some very complex issues that affect society in general. Today, we still have the issue of crime in Black neighborhoods. Dr. King said it was because of ignorance and a lack of education and poverty all put together. And he said, unless we eliminate those three problems, we're going to continue to have crime. We're going to continue to have social injustice. So we still have these problems with us. And it's not only inequality, but it's also a matter of ignorance. And it's also a matter of making these issues important to people. He would have been out there today fighting for the rights of lesbians and homosexuals and others. He would have also been talking about what's going on in Iran and other countries where people are fighting for their common rights. Women in particular, are looking for equality and justice. He would be talking about that. And his basic principles and his life is a perfect example of what we all should be espousing. We all should be living by those values, by those moral values, and be committed to them. And if we all thought about them and all talked about them, the world would be better. And that's what we need for 2024, to bring him back, bring back his example, and to use it, and to use his style, his technique more to deal with the problems that we're facing. And I believe young people in particular would be attuned to that.
Yeah. And get back to his language, which was embracing and inclusive and not polarizing. Unfortunately, we have a society now that makes its money through polarization. A news media that's on the left, news media that's on the right. Trump is a bad guy, Biden's a bad guy, click this, click that, in order to get fractions of a penny that, of course, add up to billions of dollars. So there's become an industry of divisiveness, which is a problem as well. Why, of all people that you could have spent time researching and writing about, and, time is a precious resource, of course, did you choose Martin Luther King?
I felt Dr. King embodied a universal language and a universal set of values that we really need today to talk about. He was also against war. He wanted peace. He talked about peace all the time. But he said, unless people's rights are protected, we will never have peace. So he would have defined the war in Ukraine as a violation of people's inalienable rights to be free. He would have talked about what's going on in the Middle East right now and saying, well, you can't have a war for the wrong reasons. A war has to have the right reasons. And you can't have people who denigrate others by using social media. So he would probably use social media today. And this is why I hope when another Dr. King comes about after reading this book, he would use social media for the right reasons instead of the wrong reasons. He would use it as a good example. And I do hope that somebody is inspired by this and thinks and begins to think about what happened 55 years ago. And this particular man, this particular individual who cuts across all different types of societies, all different types of people around the world, is so relevant to us today. And we need to talk about him more.
Absolutely. I also think he took his role as a Christian very, very seriously. And that Christian message was found within his words as well. Has anybody here seen my friend Martin? Can you tell me where he's gone? Like we said in the beginning of this interview, he left a big hole in a lot of people's hearts and in society when he left this planet. Emilio Iodice has written a powerful book that is well researched and well crafted and well written. It is called Lessons in History, the Leadership Challenge of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Why It Matters Today. It takes a deep dive into Dr. King's unparalleled leadership qualities and their impact on the civil rights movement, a movement that is still alive and well today, and of course, much needed. Emilio, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you, Logan. Thank you very much.
I appreciate your time. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.